Hello, friends. This is the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. The goal of the AlphaList podcast is to empower CTOs with the info and insight they need to make the best decisions for their company. We do this by hosting top thought leaders and picking their brains for insights into technical leadership and tech trends. If you believe in the power of accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Plus, if you're an experienced CTO, you will love the discussion happening in our Slack space where over 600 CTOs are sharing insights, or visit one of our events. Just go to alphalist.com to apply. Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is Shawn Wang, who's also, or can be found by the nickname Swyx on the internet. So Swyx.io is his blog and personal website. So Shawn, you seem to be kind of a jack of all trades in software engineering, DevRels. You advise a lot, you invest a lot. Is that a good description for yourself? Like, can you pitch yourself maybe a little?
Right now, the way I talk about myself is that I work in developer relations and developer community focused on dev tooling and dev infrastructure startups. So dev. And that's basically come out of my background working on or being head of developer experience at 3 unicorns, which is Netlify, Temporal, and Airbyte, and then also working in the same role at AWS. I've also been done a lot of community works in the React and JavaScript communities, as well as started my own community for Svelte Society from 0 to about 16,000 people right now. And I started in angel investing in developer tool startups about 4 years ago, and I have a small community for that one. So that's about what I do. I also write and blog a little bit.
Okay, so you have a community for your personal investments, or how does that look like?
Yes, because basically you don't really want to talk about money on Twitter that much, and you need a space for, let's say everyone is like your sort of friend group that is also interested in investing in startups. You need a space to share your deals and stuff. So I just started a Discord 2 years ago, and it's grown to about 600 people now. And it's small, it's not one of the biggest Discords out there, but we talk about trends in technology and what we think about certain deals and startups.
Well, who has 600 friends? I don't know. It's a lot from my perspective. So
it's just so there's 2 gates. Like one is like the public side, and then one is the sort of verified investor. So you have to be a qualified investor in the US, with net income or total assets above a certain amount, and then you have to be referred by someone in our group anyway. So it's one of these, like, it's basically a quasi syndicate.
Okay, cool. Before you tell us more about your investment, so today we're here to talk about next level AI and infrastructure, because like I saw like some of your stuff. I mean, Obviously you're deep in infrastructure, but also you recently did a few podcasts and blog posts around GPT in particular, and AI in general. And it's kind of scary. We both thought it makes sense to maybe discuss it a bit deeper. It's not only scary; it's great, right? I don't know how you see it personally. Maybe we start with that. Like, what do you think about it?
What do I think about it? I think it is the biggest change in technology, at least since the iPhone, and probably it's going to be bigger than the iPhone. If you read Bill Gates' blog, Bill Gates has been around technology for, 60, 70 years. And he was like, there's been only one other time that has been as big for me in his recollection, which is when he was at Xerox PARC and he saw the graphical user interface. There's been nothing else in the past 50 years that has been as big as the proliferation of AI right now. So Bill Gates thinks it's a big deal. You should probably take it seriously.
Well, he's invested big time, right?
Yes.
Maybe that's also like part
he doesn't
of
need
his
more money,
excitement.
but yes, he does have a vested interest. But he also, at this point, near the end of his life, there's nothing in it except that his genuine curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. I also believe him. I mean, he's kind of a very likely guy you automatically trust when he sends a blog post, right? It's like would be strange to distrust him in that.
Well, there's some people who don't like him that say a lot of his charity work is just PR. But again, when he talks about technology, take him seriously. And then when he talks about curing malaria or something, that's a different topic. But when it comes to technology, he's an expert.
Well, he was wrong once when he told people that no computer will ever need more than 640 kilobytes in RAM, right? That was not correct, but yes. I think that's a long time ago. But back to you, like how scared are you of GPT?
Not scared.
Are you scared?
Yeah, I'm scared of irresponsible developers unleashing this to a world that is not ready for it. In the same way that you would not run untrusted user input on your database, you would not run untrusted input on your terminal with a sudo command. We should not be connecting GPT to the outside world that is completely unsupervised. That is the problem, and that is currently what people are doing right now with two projects, AutoGPT and Baby AGI. This is literally keep the GPT running in the background, give it a goal, and then just let it do whatever it wants, and you don't even have to watch it. These projects have gotten something like 20,000 stars in the past 2 weeks, and they're very dangerous because it normalizes the idea that we can just do this without supervision. It is safe enough, and we are clearly not there yet. So apart from that, I think it's fine. I think it helps us in our daily jobs. Something like 40% of new code written right now is generated by GitHub Co-pilot. And also it reduces a lot of mundane labor. The way I think about it is you want to think about the changes in capability in two fashions. One is it lowers the bar for people to enter into some kind of industry or or do some kind of task, right? So I am not a very good Python programmer, but now with ChatGPT, I can figure out anything I want in Python because I know how to describe what I want and it tells me what I want and I can roughly read syntax. So it lowers the bar for me for figuring out all those Python idiosyncrasies and the libraries that I may need to pull in. The other thing they might do is raise the ceiling, right? So if you're already a very, very super proficient Python developer, how can it help you by automating away some of the boilerplates that you would normally spend a lot of your time doing, but now your time is freed up, right? The way I also think about it is that everybody just got a free junior engineer. And I think that is a good approach to do that. And especially because you're from Europe and I guess for the European people in the audience, I do think there's one thing to be afraid of, which is privacy and security, right? Something like 11% of developers right now are pasting your source code into ChatGPT and just giving it to OpenAI. I think that is not a big deal. OpenAI doesn't care about your code. It really doesn't. Without context, like 100 lines of code, I don't care, right? If you talk about sending 100,000 lines of code, yes, I care. Okay. But if it's 100 lines of code, no one cares. Your code is not that special. Come on, right? Get over yourself. But there are a lot of privacy conscious CTOs that worry about that sort of thing, right? And that's your right. I just disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of like at least boilerplate code, right? And
so much
like 90% of code is boilerplate. So yes. we all know that. Yeah.
I think, by the way, it also encourages good coding practices. I don't know how much time you want to spend on coding stuff versus infrastructure or startups or anything like that. I can go wherever you want. But just a brief comments. Yeah. I have never really done so much commenting as I do when I write with GitHub Copilot.
Yeah.
Because right now in order to generate a first pass, I will write the comment for the function that I want to implement and then see what Copilot gives me, right? If it gives me something good, I'll take it. If it's crap, I'll discard it, right? But at least it lets me think about what I'm trying to do and forces me to write it down in the comments. And I do end up with much better commented code. And then after I'm done with the implementation, I can actually generate a test for it. And that's something that is not common right now, but it will become increasingly common. And GitHub Copilot X, which is the new extension to GitHub Copilot that was announced a few days ago, is promising to do that. We'll see if it actually is good at that. We don't know, right? And very much so, you have to judge these things based on how you judge things when the V1 comes out, right? The V1 of the iPhone was not that good. V3 of the iPhone was a little bit better. V10, V14 was extremely good. So you should look at it the same way, right? Like, you'll laugh at Copilot now. It generates a lot of bad code. Yes. It generates insecure code. Yes. It will get better every single year.
Yeah. The steps will just become smaller, right? Incrementally improve, and not in like huge steps, I guess. And that's the crazy thing right now, that if you look into the world, like even things like AutoGPT and stuff, like every day something crazy comes out where you just think, or I just think, okay, like how can I keep track of this, and how can I learn to use all of that, and what should I look at, what shouldn't I? Like, do you have any practice or best practice on how you like deal with it, like when you decide like what to learn and what to abandon?
I'm a bit more extreme than others because I have been very influenced by Jeff Bezos. I am my first career was in finance. Jeff Bezos used to work in finance. I worked at a hedge fund. He worked at a hedge fund. When he saw the internet growing at 23,000% in 1994, he dropped everything. He quit his job as the first VP of technology at D.E. Shaw to drive to Seattle and start Amazon. And I think you're seeing that kind of growth now. There's been about 1,000% growth in ChatGPT usage since January, and we're currently recording this in early April. And so annualized, it is faster than the internet growth in 1994. So there's some point at which you should re-examine why you are doing what you're doing right now. And if the assumptions have changed, or if there's more opportunity elsewhere, you are allowed to drop everything. People will not judge you, or you should not care what they think if you're being judged. That said, we still need people to do good work. So absolutely stay where you are, and figure out how to incorporate it into your jobs, right? And I think that's part of what I would like to try to help people figure out as well, which is how do you incrementally help? And I really like the way that GitHub Copilot did it, right? When GitHub implemented Copilot, they took 6 months to figure out the UI, which is an autocomplete style thing. Why is it autocomplete? Why is it not a separate chat window? That's because they wanted it to plug into your existing workflow. It should be no additional lift to you. AI should just be present to help you and get out of your way if it's not helping you. In the same way that Google has kind of perfected the autocomplete for Gmail, and it tries to guess what you want when you sort of type in Google search. I think that's the way it needs to be, unintrusive for most people. And then if you want to take advantage of AI agents, if you want to take advantage of the emerging frameworks that are created with prompts in GPT, you can do all of that. You can keep up with model research. There's nonstop. Full-time ML researchers feel overwhelmed with the amount of progress that's going on. So you should not feel guilty that there's just so much going on and you're not on top of it. Don't worry. Even the people whose job it is to keep on top of it cannot keep up with it. So I think it's okay. Like, focus on the problems that you would like to solve. See what's available out there. If it's not good enough, then just wait. Wait a year and then come back again next year.
Okay. So I don't know how much you personally are able to look into the future, or at least guess the future from what is happening right now. Yeah. But how do you think this will change engineering and total in, let's say, the next 10 years? Like, a few people really have like dark predictions that like engineering will essentially disappear in 3 years, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
But like I also don't believe in that, because like when I use like ChatGPT, it spits out very useful code and like sometimes much cleaner than my personal one. But still, I have to understand it in a way at least. And if I don't, then I'm busted, right? It doesn't work. You think that's the root of of everything then, or like will it continue like that?
I'll take an analogy for everyone listening, right? Deep Blue essentially beat Garry Kasparov, the best human chess player in the world in 1998. Has interest in chess increased or decreased since then? It's increased. Stockfish, now everyone can run Stockfish, which is the premier chess engine, and they actually use it to improve their game. And so now the best chess players are the ones that use AI to help them improve themselves. And there's still a lot of interest in watching humans play humans, even though we know all of them are completely outclassed by consumer AI running on your phone, right? So that's chess. Same for Go, same for poker. All of these have been essentially solved. Same for StarCraft, same for whatever other domain that you can think about. And I think that's going to be the case for programmers and CTOs, which is that the boring, basic, solvable stuff will be solved, but there is still a frontier of capability that we can always strive towards. The standards are always increasing, and there's ever higher levels of abstraction that we can work at, such that when we have a clean abstraction where that AI can take care of, then we don't worry about it anymore, and we can sort of progress to the next stage, right? You can think of operating systems and databases as a very primitive form of AI. How often do we have to go down to those levels of abstractions? Not very often, right? Because it's handled by someone else. And I think basically what this is it starts intruding into business logic, right? You can see examples like Marvin AI, and any of the sort of text to SQL capabilities where you sort of tell the AI like what this endpoint is supposed to do, and it just does it. You don't have to implement any of the implementation detail. And I think that is the way that these things go, because it's junior engineering work. It's still not going to do architecture well, at least not for a while. And it just doesn't have enough data points to handle large systems. And so the more into the frontier you go, the less data points it has, and therefore you still need humans to independently figure things out. So in terms of concrete predictions, I do think that the worst developers should feel threatened because they were not producing much value anyway. And either they level up or they change careers. And that's up to them to decide. The best developers will be 10 times more productive, and they will probably make a lot more money because they can use AI effectively in their jobs to be a lot more productive than they were before, right? You should see that, for example, startups reach the same set of revenue with a lot fewer employees because they are able to essentially employ AI employees to do what they're doing. But you have to be a very good engineer in order to do that. And guess what? Engineers are the best people to figure this out because we know how to build systems. The rest of the economy who are not technical will struggle behind. They're always 5-6 years behind because they have to wait for you to standardize everything and build nice user interfaces for everything before they try it out. Whereas we're comfortable with API calls and terminal interfaces.
Absolutely.
Then one more thing, which is also just like boilerplate translation work, means that actually, I think for people interested in programming languages and types and interfaces and standards, I think it means that there will be 1,000 DSLs blooming because now the cost of adoption of DSL goes down to 0. So you can create a DSL and then describe it enough such that GPT understands it, and anyone using your DSL can just kind of describe what they want and get the appropriate DSL. So the learning curve is just gone down for anything custom.
Okay. And thinking about like code and how we write code, do you think like in 10 years, it's just going to be like the next version of Co-pilot, or you think it will lead to us writing different languages like English or or
Yeah, we're
German?
already writing English. So
yeah.
Mitchell Hashimoto, the creator of HashiCorp and Terraform
Had
and
him in the
Nomad.
podcast here.
Okay, excellent. He commented about the ChatGPT plugins API, which is not really an API. It's a JSON manifest that hits OpenAI. Hits your Open API spec, gets a list of your routes, and then figure out what to do based on the name and the documentation of the routes. And the only thing that you program is in English, where you just tell where you tell ChatGPT what your purpose of your plugin is and what it's capable of doing. So the hardest new programming language is English. That is what Andrej Karpathy, has summed this up as, and that is your backend. But you still obviously need to do implementation detail, and there's still a bit of stuff to do for programmers there.
Okay. So you're absolutely positive on how the world will look like tomorrow, or at least the engineering world. I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can go further, right? So what I would say, last year is sort of the year of large models. You want ever larger models, but I think that has kind of tapped out. Even OpenAI has stopped emphasizing the size of their models. It's rumored that GPT-4 is 1 trillion parameters, but it's starting to get impractical and expensive and slow. And so I don't think people want to just add parameters anymore. They want to improve the data sets. They want to improve the way that we have architectures. Like there's quite a lot of smart people that I've talked to here in San Francisco who are saying that transformers are a passing thing, and the next new AI architecture might be the Hippos architecture or something else that incorporates long context, because right now transformers are quadratic in their context length, and that's very not very performant. So there's all these sorts of debates about architecture that will move on. But I think what was probably true for this year is that multimodality is going to be more and more of a thing. So how do you blend vision and text? How do you blend audio and text? And how do you generate text to video? Any transitions in modality there. And, if you saw the GPT-4 developer live stream, I would draw people's attention to Greg Brockman's demo about how he was able to draw a UI with a pen and a piece of paper. And then took a photo of it, and then it was able to code it up in a realistic looking UI. That is not new. That has been done with some others, domain specific UI. But what is interesting is that this is general purpose AI, right? Like, so in other words, it's just capable of doing a lot more things. And the number of things that it does is a square. Its value is a square of the number of things that it does, right? Because it's a sort of typical Metcalfe's law type scaling approach. So there's just a lot of possibilities that are being opened up here that are still completely unexplored. Next year, I definitely think that there's a lot more emphasis on smaller models and model optimization, but that is a production issue. Right now, we are in a expansion phase. We're trying to explore what is possible before optimizing, right? So we shouldn't get too caught up in optimizing things.
And next step, we can run it on a Raspberry Pi, which already is partly possible, right? With Llama and so on.
Yes, but have you looked at the quality of Llama, right? Like you have real trade-offs here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the most interesting research coming out of Google is looking at the boundary conditions where intelligence emerges. It's not linear in the sense that a model that is 50% smaller will be 50% as useful. It could be 5% as useful, because the emergence appears in some kind of complex adaptive system fashion that we don't understand.
Absolutely. But how do you think this will change the way our devices work at home? I mean, it's like a little detour.
I don't know. IoT is one of those things that I conspicuously don't spend much time on, because there's a lot more electrical engineering involved, and I just don't have the background for it.
Okay,
I'm a software guy.
Okay. Then just one or a few sentences on the plugins that are down the road and that were recently announced by GPT or OpenAI. What do you think this will mean for devs and startups? Because it's like a really big ecosystem that could be appearing there, right? That could be a chance, like, I don't know, the iPhone App Store back then, right? Just like way crazier as far as I see it. Like for indie devs, SaaS developers, and so on, what does this mean?
I think your productivity will be increased. I think there's a lot of opportunity in starting things up because you can move faster than the large companies. I've been I just left a 150 person startup where it took 4 months for us to start having AI strategy meetings. Whereas you can pivot immediately and you don't have to get consensus on a certain point of view. You can just try things until something works, which is what most of the startups now are doing, right? Which is great because everyone is interested in something new every single day. And if your thing hits a nerve and takes off, then you'll have taken advantage of your small size to iterate faster than the big companies can.
Yeah. I would be scared if I would run an AI startup that is like 3 years old and now got hit by that, right? That's really depressing from my perspective for those, right?
No, I think it's always, only the paranoid survive. This is a very classic Intel quote. I forget the founder, Andy Grove. That's the title of his book. And, either you disrupt yourself or you wait for someone else to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing more to add. And how do you think this will, I mean, you worked in infrastructure a lot, how this will potentially influence how we think about infrastructure tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. So at the very, very baseline, in our infrastructure tooling, we have very much over-optimized for CPUs. And we are very much optimized for large data centers with few regions, which is fine. But the landscape and the infrastructure needs might change quite a bit based on from here, right? The nature of training, and you need to separate training and inference for AI. Most of us will be involved in just inference, which is just running the models instead of training them from scratch. Obviously, those are much lighter weight in terms of the infrastructure requirements, but still they need a lot more memory. They need a lot more GPU, and they need a lot more co-location than the other stuff that we're used to. And we just don't have serverless GPUs worked out. It is very, 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 very cutting edge. I actually live with close to one of the founders that are doing it, brev.dev for people that are interested, as well as exafunction.com. Serverless GPUs are not well figured out. Most GPUs are running at less than 50% of their utilization because we don't write good GPU code. We have the compilers that we have for JAX and the other sort of GPU languages are just not that great. And so a lot of people are doing this stuff in-house, and there aren't really any frameworks that have emerged to become the winners there yet. So that's the extent of my knowledge for serverless GPUs, but I know that the utilization is a problem. I know that supply is a problem as well. NVIDIA being a central chokehold. And by the way, China is next door to where we get most of our chips. And, every day China is looking over and going, that should be us. This gets geopolitical extremely quickly as well. I do think that Europe has some other advantages to it. GraphCore, there are some other emerging GPU companies that are exploring other kinds of architectures that could emerge. But by far, obviously, NVIDIA being like 30 years old has run away with this market.
Does that sometimes, yeah?
So I'll comment a little bit on edge stuff. So we talked a little bit about like the highly concentrated nature of this. In fact, there's a high-level meeting notes between Rippling's co-founder and Sam Altman from OpenAI, where they basically observed that the main thing limiting the development of AI is just concentration of GPUs. And it turns out that training is an extremely concentrating force in a way that you need to essentially network hundreds and thousands of NVIDIA A100s together in very close proximity to effectively emulate a giant monolith framework computer. And so you cannot you cannot limit yourself by speed of light. Everybody has to just concentrate in one area. I think it's in Austin, Texas. And I think that there'll be a few centers like that. Yesterday there was actually a petition for a CERN equivalent of AI training clusters in Europe as well, because this is just what will have to happen. But still, that's on the training side. Going back to inference, we have to think a lot about more edge use cases because, we have to deliver these models quickly. That people will want them hundreds of thousands of times a day rather than 10 times a day. Mm-hmm. And when you have those order of magnitude improvement changes in demand, then you need to bring things a lot closer to them because otherwise they would just not use it. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants a slow AI. So yeah, those are the infrastructural opportunities, I think, just at a high level. There's one infrastructure idea I'm working on as a startup, but I'm not super ready to share that yet. And basically, I do want to work on the latency issue.
And so you think it's all edge computing and less like central data centers?
I think everything will boom. This is the next wave of infrastructure investment, and it will continue booming like it has boomed for the past, 40, 50 years, right? You always find a new wave, but it continues booming in different ways, right? So it will just keep going.
Any concrete investment idea? Like where would you invest these days?
Yeah, so I'm investing my own time in my startup idea. I do also think that so the hottest startup that has emerged in this new phase is LangChain, which is a prompt templating framework that has encoded the best practices of all the ways that we know how to build software with GPT so far. And I think it's a good idea. I don't know how they're going to monetize it because it's open source, and honestly, it concatenates strings in smart ways. So string concatenation, you can do it yourself. You don't need a framework to do that, and but some people want it, but I also don't think you're going to pay for it very much. Anyway, they're working on a marketplace. They're working on a bunch of other things, but this is the classic startup challenge of how do you find a wedge that is very popular and then turn it into a monetizable thing. And then the other investment that I have is in databases. So there's a new set of databases that are sort of AI native, in the sense that they speak embeddings, which are the sort of internal assembly or internal representations of data that these models use to rely on.
Okay, and if you think about like the more mature businesses and how, for example, private equity works, like if you were like a modern private equity company, like where would you invest? Would you say like data centers is still way to go, or like it's like it will explode, or how do you think about that?
No, I don't care about that kind of stuff. Yes, data centers will structurally continue to grow, right? So if you're projecting like a slowdown in spends, maybe you'll take like your 2030 projections up by 5 to 10 percentage points or whatever. That's just playing around with numbers on an Excel sheet. I'm not super interested by that. I used to be a financial analyst myself. Where I think private equity really adds value is having a central core competence and then buying poorly run businesses and then taking them over with some core competence that you have, right? It's not just firing a lot of people, but it's also coming in and installing a playbook that is essentially the roll-up. I love the roll-up model. I think Constellation Software is the one that's in the US that's interesting. And they have this giant operating manual that they just install. They buy like 100 companies a year, maybe even more than that.
It's crazy. Like almost no one knows them, right?
They're pretty. No developer knows them, but as long as you're in tech and in investing, you've heard of them. Also, because he's like the richest black billionaire in the US, so I think that's an achievement for sure. But yeah, so develop a core competence in how AI runs operational, parts of the business more effectively, and then take over businesses that are not leveraging them, because your ROI will be a lot higher.
Okay, makes sense. But coming back to tech and infrastructure, what does that mean for the classical orchestration frameworks? Will it just like continue? Will we just continue working with Kubernetes in the future, and will it just evolve and adopt to those needs, or you see anything crazy around?
When you say orchestration, other than Kubernetes, are you thinking about anything else?
No, I don't have a particular idea, but
because I have worked in orchestration. Temporal is an orchestration framework.
Yeah, I know.
It's not Kubernetes versus Nomad. It's Kubernetes versus Temporal versus like Dagster versus Prefect. There's different ways to think about orchestration, and so I was just kind of testing your views on how these things go. And I can talk about Kubernetes versus Temporal as well if you want. But I think that there's always going to be a layer where running AI models just does not make sense. And operating systems, and Kubernetes is essentially an operating system for the cloud.
Yeah.
Operating systems are, we have 40, 50 years of history, and we know how to do this kind of stuff generically. I don't think we should throw that away. I don't think it will go away. I think this stuff will probably require a different type of Kubernetes, again, because Kubernetes has optimized for compute. And we don't know how to, I don't know. I don't think we will ever see a custom resource definition for GPUs or whatever that scales them appropriately for serverless types of expectations. So there may be new Kubernetes that is sort of AI native, right? Someone's going to come along and like, I'm going to rewrite everything in Rust, right? And then
most likely that will happen.
This is AI native, right? And that might be a real threat, right? Because they just take the demands of these kinds of new startups more seriously than Kubernetes, which still has to serve its existing user base, right? So that is called the innovator's dilemma, which will happen. But like, who cares? I mean, still, you're not going to run your orchestration by AI. I think that is probably an overkill, because we want these systems to be very explainable, right? Mm-hmm. Like when things go down, when things, we want, and that is a core bug or feature of AI, which is we don't know why they do what they do by definition, especially if you're doing deep learning. And some level you don't want to know. So that's not very good when it comes to systems which require like 4 nines of reliability. Actually, I think it's useful to think about use cases in terms of nines of reliability, right? 0 nines and up to 1 9, I think is good for AI, and then 2 nines and above, I think you need to write code.
Absolutely, it needs to be like predictable, right? And React reliable. So good. I just thought like about like how it will evolve when everything runs on the edge, right? But like because I can hardly imagine that this will continue in the way we work right now with Kubernetes and stuff. But yeah,
I think Kubernetes will be threatened by other types of options. So, for example, Solomon Hykes, famously had this comment about Docker, right? That if WebAssembly had existed when he was writing Docker, he wouldn't have written Docker, right? So, okay, if we get rid of containers, or if we switch to a new kind of container that is much lighter weight, then does Kubernetes have a role anymore? I don't know.
So, what would you recommend to CTOs on how to on your best perspective of infrastructure and how to enhance their view on those topics? If they right now are, let's say, fully focused on Kubernetes and operating in the cloud, like how will that change?
I think it's I don't think it's wise to change your core infrastructure so quickly. At the same time, you should have the capability of running experiments that are cheap, right? So it's something on the order of, hey, 75% of your time, you're still doing what you were always doing, or you thought you would be doing 5 years ago, 2-3 years ago. Use boring technology that works, that is well documented, that we know how to pay for support. And when something goes wrong, we know how to complain that people we know how to hire people, all that stuff, right? And then about 25% of your time you should be also like.
So don't re-platform.
Don't re-platform, exactly. This is very well tried and tested technology that you'll be doing a bad job if you said rewrite everything, right? Because then your business might come to a halt, or you might start failing a lot, and you have no idea what's going on in your business, and you will be a bad CTO in my estimation. That said, you will also be a bad CTO to completely ignore everything that's going on right now, right? So I think there's some amount of just balance that you have to do as that is appropriate for like what the job of your company is doing for your customer. You know, like is there an opportunity here to take advantage of these new technologies to serve your customer better? That is your job as a CTO. Is your competitors also doing a better job of incorporating AI into their products? You should be on top of that as well. Unfortunately, right? As much as people tell you to ignore competition, the competitive environment here is huge. You know, Adobe coming out with something, and then Canva coming out with something else, and you know, every like Microsoft and Google fighting every single day and hosting competing conference and press media events side by side. If Microsoft and Google are in an existential battle with each other, you should be looking out as well competitively. Like the competitive environment has been so much like I definitely think like in the zero interest rate environment, everyone was like very free and easy. Everyone could focus on work-life balance. Everyone could focus on like, here's what I think about career ladders and all that, and OKRs, and none of that matters now, right? Like how are you serving your customer?
Yeah, and how can you do that better?
Yeah.
How can you optimize that? Okay, thanks a lot. So we slowly have to come to the end. And as you seem to be like really a tool guy, like you seem to discover crazy amounts of tools, especially these days in the GPT world, right? What is the craziest thing or the best thing, not the craziest thing, you recently discovered that let's say makes you more productive in your day to day?
So I will talk nonstop about Co-pilot. I think that is a very good thing as well. I will give a shout out to warp.dev. That is a Rust-based new terminal that is pretty easy to adopt because it's just a terminal. You know, you're familiar with terminal. I would say the privacy conscious people should try to keep a lookout for how to turn off the telemetry, because some people have issues. It is a startup, so it tries to get telemetry, but I think you can turn it off. But it has an AI feature that's really useful, which is anytime you want to do something in the terminal and you don't really know how to like look up the flags for like FFmpeg or write awk scripts or bash for loops and anything like that. It has a command where you just do control tilde and you just write it in English and it will translate it for you into the appropriate commands. Guess what? I use that 10 times a day. It's great. I write so much more bash now because I don't need to learn bash. I mean, I know a bit of bash, but like I don't have to memorize it, right? Like stop putting this into your head and let the AI figure it out. These are all very commoditized nonsense that you should just let it handle, right? I think that makes a ton of sense. I'm also very interested in scheduling tools. So there's a wave of calendar scheduling startups that are able to read your email conversations, and when you forward it to them and help propose times, book meetings on your calendars, just invisibly get out of your way and stop with all the boilerplate routine stuff that we see time and time again. So there's tons of tools like that, and we're discovering new ones every single day. I'm very excited for the programmers in the room. I'm very excited by the ChatGPT Python interpreter plugin is what they call it. It's not released yet. I haven't tried it personally myself, but I've seen some videos, and I think it is a new combination of notebook and REPL. It is a new form of literate programming that we've never seen before. And if you care about literate programming and fast iteration and types of programming environments that are not the IDE, I think that this is going to shock you. So you should look at the Python interpreter plugin.
Okay. And in which scheduling solution did you recommend?
Honestly, there are a lot. I guess like currently I use SavvyCal for my personal one, but the AI enabled ones are not released yet. They're actually startups that
Okay.
have been shown to me in hackathons.
Okay.
But it is obviously the way that these things are going to go. You want to copy your AI assistant, and then it just sets up the meeting. No more back
Okay.
and
So
forth.
this all makes me want to sleep for three months and then just wake up again and see what
Yeah,
happened to the
or
world.
you could build it, right? There's a lot of investment money waiting for you if you want to try something with a startup idea.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interest in San Francisco, at least,
Yeah.
in this kind of stuff. So build it, solve your own problems with it. I'm very interested in like a personal therapy journal. I don't like talking to a therapist because I think a therapist is another human that has problems. But I don't mind talking to an AI and telling the AI my problems because the AI doesn't judge me.
hmm hmm Yeah, absolutely. So much interesting ideas that drop out there. Like talking about the future, maybe a little bit more about the past. I still have a little surprise for you. So Sam Altman actually told me about like a hidden feature, a hidden plugin in the new ecosystem. Um, it's called Time Machine, and it actually allows us to travel back in time. Just using ChatGPT, and I now hit the prompt that I wanna see yourself like 10 years ago, and it now lets us travel back in time to the year 2010, let's say. What did you do back then?
I was graduating from college
Okay, great.
and I had just decided that. So I was a government scholar and I'm from Singapore, and that means you have to kind of go back and work in the civil service. And I went to work in a central bank, and that was my first big career mistake of my life. We can talk about that later, but yes, that's what I was doing back then. I was in a completely different career. I was already interested in technology, but I did not see myself as a technical person or as a developer. And then I spent the next 13 years fixing that.
Okay. And if you had the chance to now whisper something into young Sean's ears, what would it be?
Believe in yourself when your gut is telling you that everyone else is wrong. You are not the problem; they are.
Okay. That's good. So thanks a lot. Nice
Thank you.
conversation. Really
Thank
like
you.
lots of stuff happening right now, and let's pick this conversation up in a few months and
Oh, my pleasure.
maybe have another one.
I'm sorry for
With-
it being so AI focused. I did
no,
not
no,
intend
no.
it
I
to be
love
like that.
that. I absolutely love that.
Happy
Thanks
to
a
talk
lot.
about temporal and data pipelines and all the other stuff that I've done, right? But obviously AI is very hot. So
Yeah, it's very hot. You have to talk about it. Thanks a lot, Sean. Have a
thank
great
you.
day. Hope to
Thanks,
see you
Toby.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the AlphaList podcast. If you like this episode, share it with friends. I'm sure they love it too. Make sure to subscribe so you can hear deep insights into technical leadership and technology trends as they become available. Also, please tell us if there is a topic you would like to hear more about or a technical leader whose brain you would like us to pick. AlphaList is all about helping CTOs getting access to the insights they need to make the best decisions for their company. Please send us suggestions to cto@alphalist.com. Send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. After all, the more knowledge we bring to CTOs, the more growth we see in tech. Or, as we say on AlphaList, accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth. See you in the next episode.